Hey, it's Andre here. I just wanted to spend a quick moment looking at what Create React App gives us. Now, the first thing we saw in the previous video is that we have this package.json file, and we also saw that we have these commands available to us. Now, if I open up the terminal here in my Visual Studio Code, make sure that we're inside of our project. In my case, I will cd into the test folder. And for some of you, maybe when you ran yarn start, nothing happened. And that's because you may not have yarn installed on your computer. Instead, you might have npm. So if you do npm start, this should now work. Now, for those that don't know, npm is a package manager. It's essentially a way for us to automate the process of installing, upgrading, configuring or removing any libraries that we want. For example, installing React, which Create React App did automatically for us. Now, there's also this other package manager called Yarn. You can use whichever one you want. The only difference is the commands that you put into your terminal. So it could be npm start or yarn start. Yarn was actually created by Facebook at a time where npm had a few issues. So this is just up to you, whichever one you choose. Now, one thing you notice here is that I've successfully started my app, but it didn't show up on my browser. Sometimes that could happen, so all you have to do in that case is just go to localhost 3000, and you'll see that your app is now here. Everything is working. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is this npm run build. If I close this application, again, I can use either npm or yarn. But if I do npm run build, I want you to notice what's going to happen over here. As Yihua said, we have the source folder where we have all our files. And you can think of this as our workspace. This is our workbench where we're going to work on our application. But when we actually put it to the outside world, when we actually deploy our application, if we give all these files to the browser is going to be like, I have no idea what you're trying to do. I have no idea what this syntax is. Yeah, I'm going to pass. I have no idea. And it's going to error out. Instead, by running npm run build, I want you to notice what's going to happen to the public folder. You see here that says it's creating an optimized production build. One of the beauty things of Create React App is that it optimizes the code for you. Let me show you what I mean. You see here that we now have a build folder. If I click on this build folder, you see that I have all my files in here that, well, some of them I've seen before, like the favicon, our index.html file, but you see this has been minified. So it's going to take less data that we can send from our server. If we go to the static, we see that we have our CSS files, which again have been minified. We have our JavaScript files, which over here looks like we have a bunch of them, all of them minified. It kind of looks like gibberish. But inside here, we have all the code that we wrote in our source folder, and it went through this step to create optimized build files for us. So what we want to do now is take this build folder and put it on a server. Now, we're going to go over deployment later on in the course. But I want to go back to the power of Create React App. You see, it uses Webpack and Babel, something we'll talk about later on in the course. Now, Babel and Webpack allow us to take our source folder, which, we had a lot of JavaScript files, and we're going to write a lot more throughout the course. What they're going to do is they're going to take these files, and Babel is going to do this thing first. Babel is going to say, hey, all these JavaScript files with that weird React syntax that we're not really too sure what's going on, well, I'm going to take all those files for you. And remember how traditionally we had all these browsers that, well, implemented the browser differently? Babel is going to make sure that our JavaScript files are going to work on all these browsers, no matter what version, no matter how old they are, how new they are. They're going to make sure for us that, hey, every single one of these JavaScript files is going to be understood. So it's kind of like jQuery did back in the day when we had this idea of making sure that the browsers understand us. Awesome. But what about Webpack? Well, Webpack is a module bundler. It's letting us write modular code. So what does that mean? This build folder, you'll see that we have a lot of JavaScript files in our source folder, but the build folder actually has, well, just a few JavaScript files. It has the main JavaScript file. You see that we only have actually 3 JavaScript files. And that's because Webpack is going to take all our JavaScript, remember all these imports that we're doing, and create, well, bundle everything up together and optimize it for production. Now, you don't need to understand this whole process because the beauty is that React has a dedicated team of developers, really, really smart developers that implements this behind the scenes for you. That's the power of a tool like Create React App. It's a CLI or command line interface. Other frameworks like Angular or Vue have the same thing. A way for us to start a project really, really fast, have all this configuration done for us, optimized for us, so that we can build really nice performant applications. So remember, this build folder is what we'll use to actually deploy our application. This source folder is our playground, our workplace. Now let's go back to package.json. When we look at package.json, the reason we have this is that it allows us to have this package manager. So that, remember how I said React is all about this component architecture and we can use other people's code and other components? Well, we can use this package.json to install other, perhaps, React components. So if we go to something like Material UI, you'll see that I can install component library Material UI just by running npm install, and it's going to get added to our package.json file. We're going to be exploring Create React App and other parts of this application throughout the course. But the last thing I want to touch on is what React is actually doing underneath the hood. If we go to the public folder and go to index.html, we have all this pre-set up code for us. But the key thing is that when we look at the body tag, the only thing we have is this div ID of root. Now, this is where we're going to inject our React application. But at the end of the day, all we're doing is just replacing whatever is here with a React application. But that doesn't mean that I can't keep just coding along and building something else like a hello HTML tag. If I save this and run npm start, if I go back to my app over here and I scroll down, you'll see that, look at that, I've added hello. So my app is part React, part HTML. Very, very cool. So React is something that we can inject even into parts of our application. If I right click here and do inspect and go to the Elements tab, you'll see that this application is, well, div ID of root, and then we have this app inside of here that is just HTML tags. If I open up my React developer tools, once again, you'll see that the developer tools actually just notices our React app. And it has this app component that it's created for us. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing as the HTML we see here. Finally, if we go to app.js, we'll notice that we are importing React. And if we go to index.js, we have something called React DOM. Now, moving forward, I want you to think of these two libraries are just doing these things. One is that this React library allows us to write this HTML-like syntax inside a JavaScript file. and it understands it because of this React library. The second thing is that this React DOM is that little robot from our previous section. Remember this little guy that actually interacts with the DOM? That's the React DOM. That's the little robot that can be replaced with, well, different robots. Maybe the one that interacts with a mobile phone or a desktop. This is the React package. It allows us to write JSX and build components and build that virtual DOM. And the React DOM is this little robot that actually interacts with the DOM. So if we go to the code, you see that React DOM render allows us to grab an element from HTML and insert app into it. That's all it's doing. All right, that's enough for now. Let's keep going in the next video.